Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Rayanne Terry, and I am thrilled to welcome you for an hour-long discussion and panelists on a very important topic, social mobility. I am HRD at Stepstone and Totaljobs Group, and today we'll be talking about the impact of someone's personal socioeconomic background has on their career success, and that includes access to job opportunities and based on our latest research in partnership with the Social Mobility Foundation. The session today will be recorded, and we'll be emailing the sessions, the report on our finding, as well as this deck afterwards. So feel free to just immerse yourself and listen. We'll get everything to you afterwards. And I'm excited to be joined by a fantastic panel today. Sarah Atkinson, the Chief Executive at the Social Mobility Foundation, Holly Crumpton, Social Mobility Lead at PwC, and Raj Majoria, the Head of D&I at DirectLine. Before we head into the panel, I will run through the key findings from this latest research. So feel free to add any of your questions to the chat box, and we will ask them to the panelists later. Some of you watching may already work with Totaljobs Group, but for those who don't, we work with employers to attract and retain the people that recruiters and you need for your business to grow. Whether you're looking to recruit from around the world using Totaljobs global hiring, or maybe you want to define and execute your employer branding strategy with our Universum products, we don't just post jobs. We're recruitment solutions with a range of products to drive your hiring process, whatever your priorities and challenges may be. This is alongside a wide range of research and market insights that we share with the market, which is one of which we will be doing today. So for those of you who do not know, the Social Mobility Foundation is a charity that aims to make practical improvements to social mobility for young people from low economic backgrounds through its Aspiring Professionals program, its Social Mobility Employer Index, and its advocacy and campaigning arm, which is the Department for Opportunities. The Social Mobility Foundation takes on a new cohort of over 2,000 young people every year and run programs for these young people across the breadth of the UK, focused on 11 sectors, including accountancy, architecture, engineering, law, media and communications, medicines, politics, and digital. Before we start today and before we dig into the research, I want to take a moment to properly define what we're looking at. What is social mobility? When we talk about social mobility, what do we really mean? Social mobility is understanding the difference between where someone started in life compared to where they are now. In particular, the jobs and income of their parents compared to their own. Boosting social mobility is about the importance of creating opportunities for individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to enable them to become more economically successful. The Social Mobility Commission suggests that geography, education, and employment are the three buckets that we as employers need to focus on in the UK in order to improve opportunities fair for all. In a society with low social mobility rates, such as the UK, the family you were born into significantly impacts the type of job and incomes and opportunities that you will have. This means that if you're born into a low-income family, you are at a disadvantage and you'll face more barriers when it comes to your career, your education, and your access to opportunity in general, regardless of your talent. So social mobility is typically measured by comparing your social economic background to that of what your parents or guardians. This refers to a combination of income, occupation, and social factors that can be objectively measured, as opposed to someone's class. This can be seen as more of an accurate measure because someone's perception of their class may not match up to the realities of their socioeconomic background. A person's socioeconomic background impacts the opportunities that are afforded in their lifetime, including their education, employment, housing, geographic mobility, and even their health. The impacts of someone's socioeconomic background also overlaps and intersects with other aspects of their identity. To determine socioeconomic background in our research, we group respondents into three buckets based on the recommendation of the government's Social Mobility Commission. We asked respondents what line of work their main household earner was when the respondent was aged around 14. For this report, we typically compare the experience of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to those from higher socioeconomic or professional backgrounds, and I'll define those in a little bit. On this slide, you will see examples of what kind of jobs fall into these groupings to help think through it. We also took into account the type of school respondents went to and whether they were eligible for free school meals and whether they were based in a social mobility cold spot. So in the UK, a cold spot is areas where there is low opportunity in terms of education, employment, and housing. Now that the terms are covered, let's take a look at the current state of play. The UK has one of the lowest rankings in the G7 when it comes to social mobility, followed only by Italy and the USA. Research suggests that a third of the UK population being from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, only 10% of this group make it to elite occupations. This means when it comes to top decision making and top levels of decision making and influence, whether in a business or political setting, people aren't properly represented. We also know that people in lower paid work are more likely to risk their health over the course of the pandemic, whether that's because they were essential workers or because simply they couldn't afford to take time off to self-isolate or to care for themselves. People in lower paid jobs were also in the group that saw the most significant drop in paid work. There are already early signs of the gap in the UK, and it has spread as a result of COVID-19. As of March of 2020, a third of children in the UK were in poverty. Many of us, especially parents of children who were due to sit in exams last year, may remember the discussion and the debate that was sparked following the creation of an algorithm that was created to determine the A-level grades. This algorithm led to 40% of grades being lower than teachers' expectations. And the hardest hit students for this decrease were high achievers in state schools of disadvantaged areas. In our research, we also looked at the confidence level of people who left education in the last 2 years. We found that those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds were confident they'd be able to do the job they wanted, compared to 71% of people from professional backgrounds. Looking at the age group, access to higher education level tends to increase career confidence from people who were from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. From those who went to university, almost half of them are confident in securing the job they want, compared with only 39% who left education at sixth form or college. Research from the ONS, Department of Education, and USAC shows that pupils eligible for free school meals are still much less likely than other pupils to go into higher education, particularly to one of a more prestigious university. Our own research found that almost half of the children getting free school meals felt their education background held them back. With this, when we asked candidates if they face any barriers in job seeking process, 16% of lower socioeconomic backgrounds said that their qualifications didn't meet the requirements of the roles they wanted to apply for. Access to university is still not equal, with the lack of advice and support coupled with financial concerns determining some young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds from applying. With this, you're still more likely to attend university if your parents did or if your parents had professional level jobs. Yet employers often still look for degree level qualification for many of the jobs that they advertise. Regardless of whether someone from a lower socioeconomic background graduates from university or heads into full-time work, they still earn a lower salary than those of more privileged counterparts. We calculated that those from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds earn half of which their more privileged counterparts do in their first job after full-time education. It's not so clear-cut that education is access to higher salary gaps. The gap still persists. One factor that plays a role in the kind of job opportunities someone has access to and what kind of career path becomes available to them is their access to work experience. Despite legislation in the UK that aims to cut out unpaid internship, many placements, as we know, are still offered on an unpaid basis. Alongside of this, some level of prior experience is still required for many roles. But someone from a lower socioeconomic background is more likely not to have had access to any experience compared to their more privileged counterparts. This means that later they're more likely to benefit from on-the-job learning and experience, which will also, of course, boost their CVs. In fact, 15% of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds cited a lack in confidence in writing a CV as one of their key barriers that they were facing when they were job seeking. For the younger candidates in particular, this was even higher, and it may just simply be linked to the lack of experience that they've secured. 42% of people from lower income backgrounds have never had any sort of work experience, versus less than a third of people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. People from professional backgrounds are more likely to be able to have accepted unpaid work or internships in their experience. And now we know it's not just the opportunity and experience that puts those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds on the back foot, but it's also the people that you know. Growing up, the people around us, our friends, family, school, peers, teachers, and mentors can play a big role in the career paths that we consider and eventually pursue. The Social Mobility Commission reports that someone from a more privileged background is 60% more likely to get a professional job compared to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Our own research shows that people from professional backgrounds are more likely to be heavily influenced by what their families and parents did compared to those in lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Plus, almost half of people from professional backgrounds had help from their network in securing a job versus just a third of the people from lower socioeconomic background. Looking at educational trends, with 53% of those who attended a fee-paying school getting assistance from their network compared to 36% who went to a state school. This kind of connection someone has doesn't just influence their career paths, but also their financial situation. Only 30% of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have been financially supported by their family during the job seeking process, versus 54% of them in professional backgrounds. We can read into this and read into, if you are from a lower socioeconomic background, you have to accept the first job that is offered to you, while those of more a privileged background to take longer to think through it and to negotiate to secure that role. And of course, location. Where you live also plays a key role in your access to opportunity. Over a third of people based in social mobility cold spots believe where they live has a negative impact on their job prospects. A social mobility cold spot is an area identified as having low opportunity in terms of education, employment, and housing outcomes for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The Social Mobility Commission found that you're more likely to move away from your hometown if you're from a more privileged background or have a degree, and being able to move comes with the perk of earning on average 33% more. Meanwhile, people who stay put, who stay in their current neighborhoods from a lower socioeconomic background, have a higher chance of being unemployed or in low-paying work. In our research, people from low socioeconomic backgrounds highlighted how important location impacted their job-seeking process, where a fifth were saying that there was limited jobs in the local area that would match their skills and experience. 13% of them were unable to travel outside of their local area for work, and 12% of them said that there's a lack of security where they live. While willingness to relocate is high across socioeconomic groups, 3/4 of people who grew up in a professional household were prepared to up sticks and move, compared to less than 2/3 of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's worth saying that Willingness is different so willingness to relocate, of course, is different than the reality as if whether or not they actually could relocate. Moving, especially relocating, is tied to the amount of money someone has, as well as their ability to keep up with the higher costs of city living, which is out of scope for many people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Ultimately, also, people shouldn't feel forced to choose between staying with their family and friends and where their community is, having to uproot their life in search of finding work. This concept, this mobility concept, forms a key part of the government's leveling up agenda, which focuses on localizing opportunity and a bid to rebuild communities and economies across the UK. Relocation holds more potential for those from professional backgrounds compared to lower socioeconomic backgrounds. People from more privileged backgrounds are more likely to have access to higher paid employment, career progression, and a broader range of jobs in order to study or retrain in. So if moving isn't feasible, what are your options? Remote working could be one, especially post-COVID. 58% of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds would apply to remote roles if they were relevant to their line of work, compared to 72% of people from professional backgrounds. I want to stay here that inevitably remote working is in keeping with professional roles rather than routine or manual work, but the aim of the question we asked respondents here was to understand if remote working could help bring a wider range of job opportunities across regions in the UK. The main benefits of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds see from remote work is the ability to save money, access to secure jobs, and higher pay. The majority of respondents are positive or neutral about the idea of remote work, with only 20% saying remote work would negatively impact their career. Of course, there's a lot of barriers to take into account. Some of the professional concerns our respondents from lower socioeconomic backgrounds raised revolved around their home environment. For example, not having their own space at work for home. There are learning and development factors, such as their feelings, their chance to learn new skills would be hindered, or they'd be less likely to engage with colleagues if they were fully remote. On top of this, the Cambridge Center for Housing and Planning notes that in March of 2020, 51% of households earning between $6,000 and $10,000 had home internet access, compared to 99% of households with an income over $40,000. Access to the right technology is clearly a necessity in order to retain a remote job. And of course, not every job can even be done remotely. It's more likely that if you were in a professional level job, that you were able to work remotely over the course of the pandemic, and so therefore have gained the experience at a way of working and reaped the benefits of that. So with all of this in mind, what do? We know that while the government and policy undoubtedly plays a huge role in boosting opportunity, employers can do their bit too, and people expect businesses to be proactive. Businesses can make many improvements internally to improving social mobility through their attraction, recruitment, and retention strategies, which I'm going to touch on. So first, when it comes to attraction, the main focuses are first, salary. Not only will including salary and job ads boost your application numbers across the board, 30% of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds said it would be one of the key actions that employers could do to help them in their job search. Additionally, from an attraction standpoint, school outreach, educating students about their career paths and things it could offer, investing into the building of employable skills in young people, and advertising work experience or internships as a part of the school outreach. Next, placement opportunities. Provide structured, paid internships that ideally have a pathway to full-time employment. Expenses should be paid as a bare minimum of this work experience. Apprenticeships. Treat apprenticeships as the same level as degree and offer them to as many levels as possible between 2 and 7. And lastly, and it sounds smaller, but equipment. Offer the tools needed to perform the remote work, whether that's a laptop, monitor, as well as the application process itself when possible. And how do we reach the hard to reach talent? Sometimes it can be very difficult to connect with talent, especially when it comes to reaching people that might not currently be active in the market. We know that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds put themselves forward 35% fewer roles than those of more privileged counterparts. If that's the case, it makes sense to bring the roles to them. You can target your recruitment efforts at the social mobility cold spots or areas of high number of free school meals recipients to get your jobs in front of the people that are coming from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which may not have otherwise known that these opportunities existed. This is actually the technology that drives our new Equality Boost product. It's targeted display advertising that can resonate with the people that you're looking to recruit, and a data-driven way to improve social economic diversity of your talent pool and down the track of your workforce. We have included a link to the slide, and again, all of that will be sent after this as well. So how do we recruit? What does this mean for recruitment? As a part of your recruitment, we recommend to offer guidance and support, offer advice webinars or application support, particularly aimed at younger people, as we know those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are less likely to have their own networks to lean on when applying and searching for jobs. 30% of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds say that advice on what an employer is looking for from an interviewee could help them, along with guidance of the recruitment process and potential interviewing questions. Also, check your bias. Candidates can often be overlooked based on the indicator of lower socioeconomic backgrounds, for example, accent, education, which is not a fair recruitment practice. Be sure you're monitoring applications from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and understand if there's trends in terms of where they are in the socioeconomic, where they are in the application process. Did they drop off before interviews, for example? Give concrete interview feedback to people from all socioeconomic backgrounds, especially if they are unsuccessful, so they can take that and of course learn that in later stages. And lastly, for recruitment, practice contextualized recruitment and question any assumptions you may have on what qualifications are considered for a role. Consider removing requirements if an undergraduate degree is absolutely not necessary. And with this, look at school grades in context of the location and the result of the student body as a whole. People from lower socioeconomic backgrounds identified their level of qualifications as one factor that held them back, because when it comes to jobs they were able to apply for, you could still be missing out on skills with great, on opportunities with great transferable skills, because they just simply didn't have the right qualifications. And lastly, how do we retain these employees? First, start the conversation. If you're not already, encourage employees, especially the senior colleagues and team members, to share their own stories and celebrate the diverse range of backgrounds that you may already have on your team. Second, get the buy-in. Leadership buy-in is critical for ensuring that you have an inclusive culture where social mobility is given the focus it's needed to make positive change. You could even nominate a member of your leadership team to oversee your social mobility work. Collect social mobility data and use it as the bedrock of understanding the experience of those in your workplace, whether it's social background, diversity, etc. Make sure you're communicating with staff throughout so they understand why you're asking for this data and how it fits into your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. The Social Mobility Commission actually has a list of recommended questions that you can use when starting to collect this data. These include questions like, what was the occupation of your main household when you were around the age 14? What type of school did you attend between the ages of 11 and 16? We've also included, and we'll send afterwards, a link of the recommended questions on this slide, so you can click through the slides after the webinar. And lastly, track your progress. Build KPIs, key performance indicators, so you know what you're aiming for. You can enter the Social Mobility Foundation's Employer Index and gain tailored learnings from them so you can figure out how to improve even further. So lastly, I know I've ran through a lot of stats today, and it's time to get into the exciting panel discussion very soon. As I mentioned, we'll be sending all of these slides to you after, as well as the link to the full report so you can dig into these findings and statistics even further on your own time. So to sum up before the panel, our research shows that people from professional backgrounds benefit even more from work experience, alongside the advantages that come with having a network that can connect them with jobs and offer financial support during their recruitment search. Meanwhile, people from disadvantaged backgrounds are more likely to face barriers, whether it's a result of their educational background, their location, or even their lack of confidence as a result of these factors. A dedicated employer approach to boosting social mobility in the UK through the ways of which a business can attract, recruit, and engage, and upskill and retain their staff will mean more opportunities for unlocking people and opportunities regardless of their background. This could range from targeting advertising campaigns to contextualized recruiting to offering the tools for remote work opportunities to enable people across a broader range of activities that is currently available to them. So thank you for the time, and I am excited to welcome our panelists and have Sarah, Holly, and Raj turn your cameras on to welcome. Hi, guys.
Morning.
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 Good morning. So again, I am thrilled to introduce Sarah Atkinson, Chief Executive at the Social Mobility Foundation, who we partnered with for this research. Also joined by Holly Crumpton, PwC's Social Mobility Lead, and Raj Mujaria, the Head of D&I at Direct Line. So before we jump into the questions, I'm going to throw to you all for a brief introduction, and I would like to start with Sarah to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rain. Thank you, everyone. So yes, I'm Sarah. It's my great privilege to be the Chief Executive of the Social Mobility Foundation. Rain's already talked about it a little bit. We're a charity, works directly with a cohort of over 2,000 young people each year to help them access the kind of opportunities, networks, knowledge and confidence that this research has described. Young people from low socioeconomic backgrounds often lack. We also work directly with employers. We produce annually the Social Mobility Employer Index, and we campaign and advocate for everyone to be aware of and take action on social mobility through the Department for Opportunities.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome. Holly, I'm going to pass to you to introduce yourself.
Fab, thanks, Rayan. So hi everyone, I'm Holly Crampton and I'm the Social Mobility Lead at PwC. So we're a professional services firm. We're actually working as a social mobility team as part of the wider inclusion, community and wellbeing team. So we work with the teams that do all of the fantastic work around diversity and inclusion, and also all our work with charities as well. We've been #1 in the Social Mobility Foundation's Social Mobility Employer Index for the last 2 years. So what I would say is that means we are quite far on with our journey with social mobility, but that doesn't mean that we haven't got more to do. So hopefully I can share some of our experiences and some of the work that we've done with you today. Thanks, Rayan.
Thank you, Holly. And last but not least, Raj.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Raj Mujaria. I lead the diversity and inclusion agenda at Direct Line Group. So we're one of the leading personal and small business insurers in the UK. So we've got brands such as Direct Line, Churchill, Privilege and Green Flag. We're around 10,000 colleagues who work across the UK and in a network of 22 accident repair centres. And my role is to help guide the direction of our diversity and inclusion agenda and inspire change. And we're at a very different stage of our journey to PwC. So we're still at the very early stages of our journey, about 18 months in. So looking forward to sharing some of our experiences and of course learning from the other panelists.
I was just reflecting this week with my CEO, John Wilson, and so much of the things that we're all working on, it is a journey and we're all on paths that will take so many months, quarters and years. So I think it's fantastic that we've got two of you at different stages in this journey. I'm going to have got some questions ahead of time. We may have some questions pop in from the chat. So if you haven't already dropped any questions in the chat, please do so at any point. But I'm going to start with Holly. And being further along in the process, can you share some examples of the strategies that you are focused on in improving on the social mobility at PwC?
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to. Thanks, Ryan. So our strategy covers 4 main areas, which are recruitment, so working with both the student recruitment and experienced recruitment teams to make sure that we're recruiting people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Development and progression, so looking at once people are in the firm from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, what happens to them and how do their experiences compare to those from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. Community engagement, so the biggest part of our community engagement programme is outreach with school students, and we focus on schools with a higher than average proportion of students in receipt of free school meals and schools in social mobility cold spots as well. And then finally, advocacy, so generally just advocating for the importance of the issue of social mobility both internally and externally to PwC. So just thinking about some of the key findings and recommendations from the research, what I really wanted to do was link through to the actions that we've taken on some of those areas. So in terms of outreach, as I said, our outreach is targeted at students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds using that publicly available data from the Department for Education of levels of free school meals in schools and also the social mobility cold spot data. Our outreach is linked to recruitment, so very much linked to the vacancies and opportunities that we've got available, but isn't solely available for students that might be eligible to apply for or interested in our vacancies. It's also very focused on upskilling young people to be successful in their career of choice, whatever career they choose to go on to do. So all our work experience is also paid, and all jobs and work experience must be applied for, and there's a fair recruitment process for students to access that. Our Year 12 work experience programme, Year 12 are equivalent in the other nations, is actually ring-fenced for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and students that meet our social mobility criteria. And that's recruited for through partner organisations such as the Social Mobility Foundation. So we took on a number of their cohort on our work experience programme this year. All our work experience students were actually given a laptop to enable them to do the role. It was actually a hybrid programme, so we did manage to get them in the office for some of the time, which was absolutely fantastic. But equally, we asked them to work remotely for a couple of days as well, because we wanted them to get a real life experience of, what working life is going to look like in the future. And we also gave some of the students that didn't have reliable internet access a PwC iPhone to tether from so that they could get internet access throughout the week as well. Our work experience programme that I've mentioned is ring-fenced for students from specific backgrounds, and also it's heavily linked to the Skills Builder framework as well. So we work with a partner organisation called the Skills Builder Partnership, and what we found is that's been really beneficial for the students, also makes it attractive to teachers, but equally it's really good in terms of measuring the impact of your programmes and how students have developed throughout the week. So we feel it's important for students to really go away and think, I've been able to develop these skills throughout the week, and that will stand me in good stead for applying for future roles. And finally, because I could talk for hours on this, but I won't, we engage with lots of different partner organisations and try to work really collaboratively on this. So obviously we're working with the Social Mobility Foundation, but we work with many others, such as the Social Mobility Business Partnership, Uptree, Teach First, many others that work with students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds as well. And we also work with our competitors. So what I would say is there's a lot of areas where I think competitors don't traditionally work together, but on social mobility, everyone's trying to work towards the same aim. So we do work with our direct competitors on outreach programs with students as well.
I love that. That's fantastic. And then Raj, kind of the opposite is being more early in your journey. What advice would you give for companies who are just starting this journey or this path?
So yeah, we at Direct Line are at a very different stage of our journey. So I think for me, the first stage is you've got to have a base coat within your organisation around inclusion. So you have to look at building inclusive mindsets. You've got to build psychological safety. You've got to build an environment where people feel like they can be their genuine selves and not have to cover. And I think for us, there's probably 3 things that we've started off doing. I think the first one for us is opening up the conversation. So we've been very fortunate that we have an incredibly passionate social mobility employee network, and they've helped us to raise awareness of issues, They've provided a forum for people to speak about barriers, and they've helped us to use role models to inspire others. The other thing we've done is we brought in people to come and talk to people in our organisation about social mobility. Earlier this year, we held a session with comedian Tony Kent, who shares honest and humorous insights into social mobility, life as a working parent, and being a woman in IT. And I think that's really helped to start that conversation. It's helped to build that understanding. I think the second thing for me is to really think about how open your recruitment practices are. So, look at the language you're using in job adverts. Don't have exclusive criteria such as minimum years of experience or qualifications. Consider using situational judgment tests, so you're not necessarily relying on competency frameworks for people who may not necessarily have the work experience. And think about panel-based interviewing. And for us, these are things that absolutely support social mobility, but they also help to widen the gate for all. And then I think the third one for me is to do something that helps to provide young people with support from an early age. So that can be running insight days to break down barriers and build skills, or support mentoring. And there's many organisations that you can partner with to do something like that. You don't have to have the infrastructure to run your own programme. Many organisations you can work with, you can do it at a very small scale. It can be as simple as running a single day for 20 students, but that's what makes a big difference. And certainly for us, those are the things that we've been doing, and really we're looking at building out from there.
I think it's really interesting what you said of some of those things that you're doing aren't just from a social economic standpoint, but truly just to enhance the diversity and the experience for all employees. I think that's so critical. And one of the first things that I saw when I started this role is me improving and doing best practice for all of our HR processes and procedures will be better for everyone involved. Sarah, what actions would you recommend for businesses to prioritize in order to improve opportunities?
Yeah, so Holly and Raj have talked about organisations that are at very different stages in their journey, but actually there's quite a lot of similarity in what they've said. They've talked first about starting the conversation, just opening up what does it mean to come from a low socioeconomic background, how does that impact you, inviting your colleagues to be brave both about sharing their own stories and also about asking what might feel like stupid questions. Talking about socioeconomic background, class, family, it's very personal and it can be very uncomfortable. If you can't get past that, if you can't build the confidence to have these conversations, that will always be a barrier to all the other things that you want to do. But in opening that conversation, it can be very powerful to put your employees in the lead in terms of shaping your story and what's going to work in your organisation. From there, you then have to think about data. You have to think about an understanding of what you've got in the organisation, how that relates to where you want to be, looking at your recruitment, looking at your progression. The data piece can be quite scary. But again, firstly, if you're having the conversation and building the confidence around a social mobility story, then people will be much more willing to answer what can feel like quite intrusive questions about what did your parents or guardians do? Did you grow up on free school meals? There's also really good support available, toolkits available, as well as organisations like PwC and Direct Line who are very willing to share what they're doing. There is good collaboration on this. We can help, the Social Mobility Commission toolkits can help, and other employers can help. So you're not on your own trying to navigate this complex picture. And then I think Raj and Holly both talked about outreach and the opportunities that things like insight days or mentoring can bring. Those are a really good place to start. Firstly, because mentoring, buddying or sharing insight is really valuable and powerful for young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds on a number of levels. It shares knowledge, it shares insight. It also helps them to build their confidence, tell their own stories. It's also very powerful back into the organisation. Our partner organisations, the mentors who work with our students, are the most powerful ambassadors. They're the kind of angriest and hungriest around offering opportunities because they see the individuals, they see the talent, they see the potential. And so it can be a very powerful way of both directly supporting young people and of helping your organisation to learn and build its confidence in its journey. And both Holly and Raj have talked about working with partners, and I think that's really important. You're not on your own doing this. It's perfectly okay to get some help. And the part that will be the trickiest, finding and targeting the support, that's the sort of thing that experienced charities like ourselves or other partners can really help with. So we can make that part easy if you can understand what you can offer.
And we've all talked about the data piece, and it's such an important element of this. Raj or Holly, could you share, like, how do we get that? What did you encounter trying to get that level of intimate personal detail from your employees? How did you work through that? We'll start with Raj.
So it's not easy, is what I'd say. But you know, it is so important to understanding where you're at, and you have to absolutely be able to measure progress. And we know that applies, that applies for social mobility, but it also applies for, many other areas: gender identity, ethnicity, sexuality, ability. And yes, the social mobility questions are incredibly personal. You're asking somebody about parental occupation, type of school they've attended, free school meal eligibility. So I think for me, it starts with the point that Sarah made, that is, it's got to be part of a broader conversation. So you have to build trust. People have to understand the why. So you absolutely can't do it in isolation. And when people understand the barriers, when people understand how the data is going to be used, that's when they're more willing to share that kind of information with you. Four things I'll share that have made a big difference to us. Firstly is making sure people managers understand the why. People managers understand the why, but are also equipped to explain that to their teams and answer questions. So the people, our people managers are the people that our colleagues speak to day in, day out. They're the people, who they trust. So if they understand it, they're able to explain it. That's what builds confidence. I think secondly, you have to be clear about how the data is going to be used and what it's going to be used for. So you have to address privacy concerns. You have to help people understand that the data is used in aggregate and the data is never going to influence a decision relating to that particular person. You have to transparently share the results. So it's great collecting the data, but you have to share that back out with the organisation and show what that data is driving. And that for us has been particularly powerful because it's demonstrated the gap we've got at senior leadership levels. And that's what helped to build the case and momentum behind the broader work that we're doing. And it's not a one and done. You have to share that on an ongoing basis. And I think finally for us is if you have employee networks, as we're fortunate enough to do for social mobility, is get the network inside the work you're doing and use them to help build trust across the organisation. And we found that peer-to-peer conversation has sometimes helped people who perhaps would have been reluctant to share that information being willing to do it because they've heard that from they've heard the benefit it can have from their peers. So not easy, but you have to work at it. But trust, I think for me, it starts first and foremost with that trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Holly?
Sorry, Ryan. Yeah, I was just going to say I absolutely agree that it's not easy, and we've certainly had our challenges around data as well. So going back about 3 years, I think we only had about 26% of our staff that had disclosed their socioeconomic backgrounds to us. And so we've undertaken a big campaign over the last 3 years and managed to increase that to 80% of our staff now and 85% of our partners, which is fantastic because that's the level of data that's enabled us to, be able to do a really robust review, publish some really interesting data, and also publish our socioeconomic pay gap as well, which we did back in September. I would definitely agree that you need to be clear on why you want the data, that you are going to use it and what it's going to be used for, i.e. to make it a fairer place to work and a fairer place to access, absolutely. I think you need to be really honest, open and clear with people and build up that trust. And we've done that through using a storytelling campaign. So we have a social mobility stories series where we encourage people of different grades in different offices in different business areas to share their story. And we've started with our chief people officer who sits on our board, Laura Hinton, and then we've profiled a number of people from different backgrounds. And every time we share one of those stories, we link back to the socioeconomic background survey and ask people to complete it, which does massively encourage people to share their data. We've also shared it through the Social Mobility Network as well. We're lucky enough to have a big big social mobility network with 2,600 members out of our 22,000-ish staff, so a really big network. And also, I think one of the other things that we've done is worked the socioeconomic background survey into our compliance returns. So every year we do regulatory compliance returns. Obviously, it's not mandatory to answer the survey or answer the questions, but because it's in the compliance return, it means everybody has to look at it at least, which has meant that many more people have completed it. Because if you get an email, it's easy enough to ignore, whereas actually when you're doing your compliance return and it asks you to click through and look at a survey, it means that much more people have actually done that. So that's just some of the ways that we've managed to get our data up so high.
85. It's a very, very lucrative percentage there. Question to all three of you is, so much of this starts with recruitment. We know we need to get the employees in the door and take care of them. Is how have you guys fundamentally changed your recruiting process, or how have you seen this change with social mobility in mind?
I'm happy to jump in if everyone else is. So yeah, I can tell you a little bit about what we've done around some of the changes we've made to recruitment. So we've got a really broad range of routes into PwC. So we have apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships, school leaver programs, undergraduate programs, graduate programs. So hopefully there's something for everyone in terms of, you know, deciding on what entry route they want to take. I think many of the roles, particularly the degree apprenticeships, and the school leaver roles, obviously offer the chance to, in some cases, receive funding towards your qualification, but also to earn while you learn as well, which, you know, is very important for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who can't necessarily afford to go off to university and get in lots of debt as part of that. We target our outreach, as I said earlier, really effectively, and then link that through heavily to recruitment, working with a number of partner organisations to specifically support students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds through the recruitment process for PwC. Our recruitment process was completely overhauled a couple of years ago, so we do now use a very immersive assessment process. A lot of it is game-based, so it's obviously more familiar to the generation that are making the applications to us, and we do use things that, like Raj mentioned earlier, like situational judgment tests. But the main thing about our recruitment process is it's now fully potential focused rather than past performance focused. So we're not asking students to give competency-based answers and go back in time and tell us what they've done or had the opportunity to do because they might be from a more privileged background. We're asking them to tell us about their potential and assessing their potential as part of that process. The whole recruitment process is conducted by trained recruiters and assessors, so we no longer have a business interview, which obviously should be objective anyway, but we know sometimes from research that, you know, from the Commission and the Foundation, that there is a lot of that fit and, you know, polish consideration that comes in within those interviews sometimes, and that's no longer a stage of our process. It's conducted fully by trained recruiters. And also, I think another thing to mention around academic requirements is we removed our UCAS criteria back in 2015. So because of the correlation between A-levels and socioeconomic background, we no longer require UCAS points for our undergraduate and graduate positions. We do continue to review the recruitment process and look at the impact that the different stages of the recruitment process have on people from a wide range of diverse groups as well. We're not there yet. We've definitely not done everything we need to, and we continue to look at tools such as contextual recruitment, which we haven't implemented as yet, and the academic requirements as a whole. But those are just a few of the things that we have done so far.
Thank you. Sarah, Raj, what are your thoughts on the recruitment piece of the story?
I mean, Holly, that I think, you know, that sounds fabulous in terms of the range of initiatives you've got in place at PwC, and some of those are things that we have started doing at Direct Line Group. For me, for those organisations that perhaps are at the start of their journey, again, sometimes it's about trying new things. It's about doing small things. So one of the things that we've done this year is, you know, as a result of the pandemic, like many organisations, we've moved to hybrid working, and that opens up the opportunity to recruit from locations that perhaps we haven't recruited from in the past. So one of the things we've tried is we've launched a customer service apprenticeship scheme that has specifically targeted social mobility cold spots, so areas where we don't have a geographical presence, where we wouldn't have traditionally recruited from. and we've gone out to kind of Derby, Mansfield, Hastings and Crawley, worked with organisations in those areas to help us to attract talent and break down those barriers to say, actually, this is a role that is available to you. And that's something we did, is we tried it ourselves, and we found actually we were struggling to attract, so we really had to think quite carefully about how we do that. But we've got, we onboarded a cohort of people who are remote based. Some of them are within travelling distance of our offices, and we've offered opportunity in areas where you wouldn't have done so in the past. So it's little things that you can experiment with that you can try to think about. Well, how do you do something small that's going to make a difference? And we're now looking at, okay, what have we learned? If we want to scale that up further, what are the things we need to think about to make sure it's sustainable and effective for the future?
I think that experimentation point is a really good one, and although the impact of the pandemic has been disastrous for the young people that we work with, the young people that we support, the benefit of such a period of enormous change is that this is a time of change anyway. Let's make a few other little changes while we're about it and see what happens. It's been quite powerful. We've seen organisations who have entered the employer index who've used the opportunity of virtual university outreach and visits, for example, to say that we get pretty good applications from some universities anyway. Let's not visit them this year. Let's target our university visits to the universities that we don't get applications from, with a higher proportion of young people, of students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and see what happens. Let's try taking the university and the student's name and grades out of the first stage of applications. Let's just judge on the content and see what happens. So I think that kind of confidence to experiment and see what happens is really important. I think it has to be in the context of a conversation that is very clear. This is not about dumbing down. We're not asking anybody to drop their standards. Contextual recruitment, potential-based recruitment. This isn't about saying we will take people who are less clever, less able. In fact, contextual recruitment is often about recognising the particular talent and capability that comes from having achieved in the face of some really challenging circumstances. But it's about, as Holly said, looking at the potential. What is someone going to be able to do for us, given the training, the support and the skills that we offer? What are they going to bring to us that will be exciting and offer growth? Not what have they already done, which may well be a factor of the opportunities they've had, not the potential they offer. But I think it is important, that spirit of experimentation, and also just recognising that you can offer support to people from low socioeconomic backgrounds through your processes. We do a lot of work. It's very much pipeline season at the moment for graduate recruiters, and we do a lot of work with partners where we offer buddying, coaching, support for our students through the application process. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed a job at the end of it. No standard is dropped, but it just means that they're helped and supported through the process in the way that more privileged young people are helped and supported by their family and their networks. It just levels the playing field a little better and enables their talent to shine a little brighter.
Absolutely. Thank you. Stephen, I wanted to see if we had any questions in the chat to throw to the group.
Hello. So we had one come through, plenty of really useful insight on how to engage young people. Does the panel have any advice on how we can engage people in the middle of their careers or who might be a few years into their working life?
So shall I start? Because I think that's a really good question. The focus is often on recruitment and on young people, and that's absolutely right. That's absolutely critical, and that's where my charity focuses a lot of our work. But we also know that this is not just about waiting for recruitment practices to mean that things trickle up. If we wait for that, we'll be waiting far too long. We haven't got the time to hang around and wait for things to get fair over multiple generations. And we know that people in the middle of their careers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, even if they've had some of the same training opportunities and education as their more privileged peers, their socioeconomic background still makes a difference. We know that there's a pay gap that exists. It can be as much as £6,000 between people from a lower socioeconomic background and more privileged peers. And that is even within the same organisation or profession. So we know that there's something that stays with you and holds you back. We know that some of this is about role models and seeing talent from lower socioeconomic backgrounds at the top of organisations. So the conversations that we were having about social mobility networks, about stories and the confidence in sharing your background and the way it shaped you within your organisation, that's really critical when it comes to progression and senior leadership. And it's really important that your senior leadership are honest about their background, their privilege or lack of privilege, how it's shaped them, because it has shaped us all. It is also really important that you keep that kind of support up. We know that where things are ambiguous or complicated, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds will lose out, because that knowledge and understanding of how to navigate ambiguity, how to negotiate when things aren't clear, how to pick a role or get informal sponsorship from someone senior, all those things that help you to accelerate your career and get to the top. If you come from a lower socioeconomic background, the lack of network and the lack of knowledge of that sort of thing from early on can stay with you. You're less likely to get picked for those accelerator roles or be able to negotiate your way into a project. So buddying, mentoring, supporting networks, that really matters, not just getting people into their careers, but helping people to get on and be successful in their careers.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you to Holly and Raj. We're just about at time, but it has been such a privilege. Sarah, your foundation does so many wonderful things. Holly leading the pack at PwC, and Raj, thank you for also sharing what it feels like to be at the start of the journey. So for those of you listening, as a reminder, we will send all of the slides, the report, all of the contact information afterwards. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.